Hello, world, and thanks for listening to episode 57 of Master English with Tim, the podcast where Tim helps you master English in depth and detail. Last week, in episode 56, I talked about the 5 meanings of the verb be. We're not quite done with be yet, though, because be appears in a common expression or construction that I did not talk about in the previous episode. That expression is there is, and also variations of it like there are, there was, there were, there have been, and so on. Actually, I originally was going to include there is in the last episode, but as I was writing about there is, I realized that this expression is important enough and complex enough that it deserves its own episode. The expression there is important because English speakers use it all the time. It really is one of the most common expressions in the language. The fact that there is complex might be surprising to you, but out of all of the meanings of be, the construction there is, there are is arguably the one that is hardest to understand and use for speakers of languages that do not have an equivalent expression, for example, Russian or Chinese. Now, in Western European languages like Spanish or German, there are absolutely direct equivalents of there is. In Spanish, they say I, in French, il y a, in German, es gibt. But not everyone is so lucky. For example, in Russian, there is no easy equivalent for there is, and Russian speakers tend to make a lot of mistakes with it. I hear some Russian speakers translate there is word for word with tam есть, but that isn't quite accurate. It's not a terrible translation, but it's not really a good one either. So what does there is mean then? Well, we use there is to bring our listeners' attention to something that they didn't notice before and that we want them to see, hear, or know. These could be physical objects that we want them to look at, phenomena that we want them to be aware of, or facts that we want them to know. This probably sounds pretty simple, but there are 2 things to remember. The first is that people very often forget to use there is, and as a result sound just a bit like cave people. The other thing to remember is that after there is, we typically use a noun, and nouns are usually used with indefinite or definite articles. I'm telling you all of these kind of obvious things because there is can mean quite different things depending on if after it we use an indefinite article or a definite one. So there's a big difference between there is a and there is the. Because our choice of article has such a big effect on the meaning of there is, I am going to review what I talked about in episode 29, where I talked about articles. In fact, it's not a bad idea to listen to episode 29 again, although the explanations in this episode for indefinite and definite articles really are good enough for the goals of explaining there is and there are. Let's start with indefinite articles. English has a few indefinite articles. With singular nouns, we use a or an. With uncountable nouns and plural nouns, we either use no article at all, also known as the zero article, or we use some, which isn't exactly an article, but it's close enough that I will include it anyway. So again, singular, a or an, and uncountable or plural, no article or some. When a speaker uses an indefinite article before a noun, that means that the speaker is talking about a noun that the listener does not know about yet. When a native speaker hears an indefinite article in speech or sees one in a text, their brain automatically says, "Oh, time to pay a bit more attention. This person is giving me new information." Here are 3 examples with singular nouns. 1. Tell me about your family. Okay, I will. I have a daughter, a horse, and a son. Okay, I know that's a silly sentence, but I'm the boss here, and I have to entertain myself from time to time. In any case, the person who asked the question does not know about the other person's family, so whatever answer that person gives, the answer will use indefinite articles. 2. Let's order a pizza. Oh, I know a new Italian restaurant that makes great pizza. So here we have a restaurant. The speaker is informing the listener about a restaurant that they didn't know about before, so we need to use an indefinite article. 3rd and last, what do you want for your birthday? I want a new bike. Again, the speaker has no idea what the other person wants for their birthday, which is why they're asking the question. And because the person answering the question knows that the first person doesn't know what he wants for his birthday, we need an indefinite article, in this case, a. Now, let's do some examples with uncountables and plurals. 1. What's for dinner? I don't know. We have leftover pizza in the fridge. Maybe we could eat it. So here we have leftover pizza. We don't have any article before it. This is uncountable, and it's the first mention, so it's, no article. 2. I need to get some more sleep. Here, instead of putting no article, we put some. Again, with uncountables, we can put some or no article. 3. I bought flowers for the vase on the table. So I bought flowers. So no article, plural, first mention. 4. Can you get some drinks from the fridge? Again, the alternative of using no article with plurals is some. So now we are ready to move on to the combination of there is or there are with the indefinite articles a, an, no article, and some. Before we do that, though, there's an important detail about the pronunciation of there is that I need to tell you about. So, in conversation, almost no one ever says there is. People use a contraction, theirs, and for there are, the real-world pronunciation is more like there're. Let me say that pronunciation again, but slower. There're. There're. Now, normal speed again. There're. Because theirs and there're are the real-world pronunciations, I'm going to use them in the rest of this episode. So, back to our combination of theirs or their and an indefinite article. This combination is much more common, so I'm going to spend most of the episode talking about it. Anyways, what does theirs or their with an indefinite article mean? Theirs and their with an indefinite article are used to bring a listener's attention to something that they didn't know about before. Let's now imagine the following scenario. You are on vacation in, let's say, Portugal. You get into a conversation with someone from England and they want to know about your hometown, which they've never heard of and know nothing about. They ask, what is there to see and do in your city? So, you tell this curious person what things can be found in your city. 10 examples. I'll read them slowly so you can pay attention to which article is used after theirs and their. 1. There's a big museum of local art. 2. There's a train station which is kind of old and needs some repairs. 3. There's an airport for budget airlines and there's also an airport for normal airlines. 4. There isn't too much traffic, but sometimes there are traffic jams in the morning. 5. There isn't much to do on weekends. 6. There are some really good Georgian restaurants. 7. There are several really nice and large parks for walking in. 8. There are some really nice murals on public buildings. 9. There are some people from neighboring countries, but not many. 10th and last, there's a floating restaurant on the river. So again, there's a floating restaurant on the river. If you've been listening to Master English with Tim for a while, then you know that I love examples. So I'd like to give you a few other random examples of there is or there are. 1. So 8 examples. 1. Why don't you drink Coca-Cola? Because there's too much sugar in it. 2. Be careful. There are some crazy and dangerous people in that part of the city, especially at night. 3. I'm sure there are people who agree with you, but I don't know any of them. 4. Look, there's a pink bird in that tree. 5. I don't like living in small towns because there's nothing to do at night and on weekends. 6. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. 7. There have been 3 accidents so far this year in our factory. 8th and last, here, take this napkin. There's a bit of food on your face. Okay, there's another use of there is, there are, which is very similar to this. This time, the speaker uses theirs or their to bring your attention to the fact that something you didn't know about, or maybe had forgotten about, exists. This time, you will notice that most of the nouns refer to things that are not physical objects. 7 examples. 1. Astrobiologists are trying to understand if there's intelligent life in the universe. 2. There are a lot of mistakes in your text. You should fix them. 3. On some historical topics, for example, the Second World War, there's a lot of information, maybe even too much information. 4. There's a problem with your car's brakes. Don't drive it until they're fixed. 5. Yes, there's a good reason why I was late to work. There was an accident on the highway, so traffic was stopped. 6. Until the invention of microscopes, scientists didn't know that there are viruses and bacteria that cause illnesses. 7th and last, there are a lot of serious issues with the company's cash flow, so we decided not to buy it. Okay, we are now almost done with theirs with indefinite articles. We just need to work on different types of sentences like negative statements and questions. Something interesting happens in all of these sentence types. The word there is actually put in the same place as the subject of the sentence. Now, you'll remember hopefully from last week that a subject of a sentence is the person or place or thing in the sentence that does the action. So if I say I work as a teacher, well, work is the action and I is the subject. So it's kind of strange here that the word there is a subject, because normally what kind of words are subjects? Well, things like I or you or she or the dog or the president or that tree. Those are normal subjects. The word there is very unusual as a subject, but that's how it is in the expression there is. So let's start with negative statements with there is. To get negative statements with there is, we just add not to the base construction. So we use the formula here, S plus A plus N, S-A-N. This is actually the same in all negative statements, in all verb tenses, all the time. But it's a question of, devil is in the details. So anyway, S here means subject, A means auxiliary, and which in this case is or are, and N is not. 3 examples. 1. There isn't any sugar in Diet Coke. 2. There isn't a good reason I was late. I just slept too long. 3. There isn't a pool at our hotel. Okay, let's move on to yes-no questions, which always use the same construction of A plus S, or auxiliary first and subject second. 1. Is there food in the fridge? 2. Is there intelligent life on other planets? 3. Is there a lot of traffic in the mornings? Now, that was third and last, sorry. Now we can do WH questions, which use the construction QU plus A plus S, which means question word plus auxiliary plus subject. This is the same construction as yes-no questions, but just with a question word like why added to the beginning of it. So, 3 examples. 1. Why are there so many mistakes in the text? 2. What is there to do on the weekends in your city? 3. Why is there always a long line when I'm in a hurry? Okay, that's all we have for there is, there are, with indefinite articles. So now let's move on to there is, there are with definite articles. We only have one definite article, which is the. We use the with all 3 categories of nouns, with singular nouns, with plural nouns, and with uncountable nouns. When we say the, we mean that we believe that the person we're talking to knows which thing we are talking about. This could be, for example, because you and I are in the same kitchen, sitting at the same table, and can see the same things in front of us. So if in this situation you say, please give me the book, you said the because we can both see that book. There's no question which book we're talking about. It's totally obvious. Now, it could also be that you and I are not in the same place, but we both are still talking about the same thing. For example, we both were at a party together a week ago, and we met an interesting and unusual woman. In that case, we would say, the woman from the party. We know which woman, and therefore say the, because we both saw the same woman and talked about her together and talked with her together. We know which party, and so we say the party. We were both at the party. Okay, so now we're ready to combine there is with the. When a speaker says, there is the, or there are the speaker is trying to bring the listener's attention to a specific thing that the speaker and listener both already know about. Not only do they both know about it, but the speaker knows that the listener knows which one. So this use of there is with the is much less common, but you can hear it from time to time. I will give you 2 situations that explain this meaning. So, first situation. You, listener, and I, Tim, are planning to go shopping at the supermarket together. We're planning to get on bus number 23. Right now, you and I are standing at a bus stop in the rain, waiting for bus 23. It was supposed to come at 11 a.m., but it's now 11:05, and we are afraid it won't come at all. Then you say, "Oh, great, look, there's the bus." In the sentence, "there's the bus," you said "the" because you know that I know that you're talking about bus 23, which we both talked about together earlier when we planned our day. You say "there is" because you're surprised about the bus coming and want to bring my attention to it. So again, there is the bus. You could also say "there is our bus." The word "our" here has a little bit of the function of the definite article "the." When you say "our," it also indicates that this is a specific bus that we both know about already. So, second situation of 2. A few weeks ago, while he was out alone, James saw a science fiction book that he thought looked interesting, but didn't buy. When James got home, he told his flatmate and friend Ellen about the book and that he hoped to find the book again somewhere. Right now, in this moment, James and Ellen are in a bookstore together. James says, "There's the book I was telling you about." Again, "the" is because both of them know which book James is talking about, and James knows that Ellen knows that James knows that he knows, and so on. It's clear which book. They both talked about it together earlier before. "There is" because James wants to bring Ellen's attention to the book. So, once more, "there's the book I was telling you about." Okay, that's all for this week. I hope this was helpful, and next week we will continue with just, 1 or 2 more auxiliary verbs before we finally get into the real meat and potatoes of the verb tenses. Thanks again for listening.